In this demo, we will look at how to look at constraint definitions and how to add constraints to an existing table. So let's open a terminal session in SQL Plus. Let me just change the output so it's a bit larger. Edit the profile to change the font to okay, so it's more easily visible. Log into SQL Plus. Let's set some formatting options because the query on user constraints will be a long output. There is a column search condition which we will see where I need to format the truncate the restrict the output. Okay, let's describe the employees table. We can see that job ID, hire date, email, last name all have not null constraints. We cannot see constraints that are primary key, foreign key and check constraints for values. We can only see not null definitions here. Let's find out all the other constraints from the user constraints view. So it's the user constraints data dictionary view. Here we see that these are all the not null constraints which are actually check constraints, enforced as check constraints. Here the check constraint on salary greater than 0. These three are foreign key constraints. So we can identify what is the primary key which is referenced by each of these foreign key constraints. Emp ID is a primary key constraint and email UK is a unique key constraint. Now you can see the employee ID here is shown as not null but does not appear as a not null constraint in the listing because the not null on the employee ID was actually created by this primary key constraint. Now let's create a table of which is a copy of this table and see if constraints get copied across or which constraints get copied across. Let me drop an existing copy table. If you don't have a copy m table, then the drop table command will just give you a table of view does not exist, which is fine. I have a table, so it just says table dropped. Now I create a new table. Okay, now let me describe copy m. I can see these not null constraints which did get copied across, but I do not know about the primary key and foreign key constraints, and I can also notice that employee ID does not have not null anymore because the employee ID in the employees table is enforced as not null by the primary key constraint definition, not by a column level constraint definition. So if I want to see the constraints here, let me run a similar query as what I ran earlier. Where table name is equal to copy m. So it is only these column constraints which are been defined as not null when the employees table was created are copied across again as not null when the copy m is created as a copy of the table. Foreign key constraints not null enforced by foreign key, check constraints for values, and referential integrity constraints and primary key constraints are not copied across. Let me try to add a constraint to this table. Alter table copy m. What is the constraint name that is I specify here? What is the type of constraint and what column is the constraint on? If I describe copy m now, I can see that employee ID became not null. Earlier it was nullable, now it is not null. And if I were to query the constraint definition now, the primary key constraint has also come in here. Let me add another constraint. Email unique key. The keyword is unique, not unique key. So you just say it is a unique constraint, and it will appear in the constraint definitions as well. Remember, the difference between primary key and unique key is primary key will never allow null values. So that is why the adding the primary key constraint definition automatically changes the column to a not null column. But unique key constraint will allow null values. So the column for the unique key can allow null values. In this schema design, the email column already has a not null definition, so that's fine. But when you are designing your own schema, remember that a unique key does not guarantee that nulls are not inserted into that column. So unique key allows nulls, primary key does not allow nulls. So what we saw here was how to query the constraint definitions. You query user constraints, identify the constraint type. These are column constraints. This is a primary key. This is a unique key. And on the employees table, we saw that there are referential integrity constraints, which are foreign key constraints. They are called constraint type R, not F, in the data dictionary. And these are the foreign keys which are there, which they are referencing. And we saw how to add constraints. Alter table, add constraint, constraint name, type of constraint, and the column which the constraint was on. Okay. Thank you.